The shocking true story behind Netflix's monster. The Jeffrey Dahmer Story, as Netflix brings Jeffrey Dahmer's real crime narrative to light. Here's all you need to know about his murders, his capture, and the riveting new series that has come from his story. If Netflix used to be considered the home of blockbusters and rom-coms, in recent years these films have been pushed to the periphery, being replaced by true crime series and gripping documentaries detailing interesting, albeit lesser-known, historical figures, as well as their stories involving espionage, deception, crime, and corruption. If there's one thing you can bet on from Netflix now, it's a very binge-worthy true crime series that will come to dominate the collective consciousness of pop culture. Suddenly, it's all everybody is talking about on social media, and conversation at the office shared coffee machine revolves completely around the newest episode. Following the publication of Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story, all that can be discussed is the heinous history of the man responsible for such murders, Jeffrey Dahmer, and the victims who suffered for years. If you aren't acquainted with the series, it chronicles the narrative of one of the world's most known serial murderers in the United States, and it comes from American Horror Story co-creator Ryan Murphy, and it stars Evan Peters as an adult Dahmer. The narrative is unsettling because it not only examines the convoluted character of the monster now known as Dahmer, but also the absence of justice that existed at the time, leaving a town vulnerable to his assaults. Here's all you need to know about the real story that inspired Monster, which is now accessible on Netflix. Who is Jeffrey Dahmer? Jeffrey Dahmer is considered one of the most notorious serial killers of all time to emerge from the United States. He murdered his 17 male victims between his 1977 and his 1991 years. Born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on May 21, 1960, he appeared to have had a relatively normal childhood, but by Dahmer's own account, he experienced his own trauma. It was my childhood. His mother had a nervous breakdown and his parents' divorce took a deep toll on him. He also believed his brother to be the dearest person in his family and felt neglected. Dahmer became increasingly withdrawn as he grew up, drinking heavily by high school, increased interest in customs and animal carcasses. What were Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes? Dahmer committed his first murder when he was 18 when he picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks who had been taking him home to his parents in Ohio. After Hicks was beaten with his 10-pound dumbbell, Dahmer dissected the body before dissolving it, pulverizing it, and scattering it around the backyard, where he later killed Hicks because he wanted the hitchhiker to stay. Dahmer graduated from high school but dropped out of college due to heavy drinking. Instead, he enlisted in the army, and from 1979 he served as a medic in Germany until 1981. He was eventually fired for drinking and returned home to live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. In 1987, he murdered his second victim, Stephen Twomey, after taking him from a bar to his hotel room. Dahmer reportedly worked next to the corpse and has no recollection of killing him. Dahmer's killings continued sporadically into the late 1980s. He would often lure men back from bars and commit increasingly horrific deeds, including rape, amputation, necrophilia, and cannibalism. He figured he could mutilate his victims into a zombie-like state so he could use them as submissive sex partners. The murders were never discovered, and after moving into his own apartment in Milwaukee in 1990, his serial killings intensified in the summer of 1991 when he began killing about one person a week. Eventually, one of his neighbors, Glenda Cleveland, played by Niecy Nash in the Netflix series, told police about a strange smell coming from Dahmer's apartment. One managed to leave the house and call for help, but when law enforcement questioned Dahmer about it, he managed to escape arrest after telling investigators the man was a drunken friend. I was. How did Jeffrey Dahmer get caught? It was after fighting one of his victims that Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested on July 22, 1991. Tracy Edwards managed to escape and called the police, who took her to Dahmer's house. He was arrested there after photographs of a dead body and severed limbs were found. Dahmer's victims were mostly men, including black boys. The fact that he was acquitted of horrific crimes for so long says a lot about the neglect of the authorities on the community that Dahmer was available to. A total of 7 skulls and a human heart were found. Dahmer was indicted by a jury on 15 counts of murder when his trial began on January 30th, 1991. With all the incriminating evidence against him, Dahmer pleaded not guilty to insanity, but the defense argued that his compulsions were out of control, was found guilty of, and sentenced to 15 life sentences, one for each victim. When did Jeffrey Dahmer die? Dahmer reportedly expressed remorse for the victims and wanted himself dead while serving at the Columbia Correctional Facility in Portage, Wisconsin, and even his inmates found out about his murder. This made him a target, and he was attacked twice by fellow inmates. He died on November 28, 1994, initially from a head injury while showering and being taken to hospital. Although he initially survived, is Netflix Monster an accurate depiction? According to a press release, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story exposes these heartless crimes and the underserved victims affected by systemic racism and the systemic failure of the police force and its community. The infamous series, Dahmer's portrayal is both cool and terrifying, largely due to Evan Peters' performance. But perhaps the show's greatest realization is the tragedy that has befallen the community. Are there any other documentaries approximately Jeffrey Dahmer? If you've already watched the Netflix series and want to learn more about Dahmer's gruesome crimes, the new series about Hayu delves even deeper into the serial killer's life and his crimes. Dahmer on Dahmer, his 2-part documentary titled A Serial Killer Speaks in his series. Dahmer's father, stepmother, former classmate, psychiatrist who testified at his trial, and the homicide investigation involved in the investigation. In-depth interviews with officials are featured. The first episode is being distributed on Hayu.